Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a really incredibly dense and frankly highly technical stack of notes to go through today.
Yeah, it's definitely a heavy one, but
Yeah.
it's centered on this single, absolutely fascinating premise.
Right, and our mission for this deep dive with you today is to really dissect the biological, the system level mechanics of this concept called discernment.
Which is funny because it's a word we hear all the time,
Oh,
right?
yeah, constantly. But we really need to figure out why your intellect, like that specific part of you that you probably rely on to, make every single major life decision.
The part that analyzes everything.
Exactly. The part that weighs all the pros and cons and figures things out, why that specific part might actually be the exact mechanism that's causing your burnout.
It is just this profound reversal of, well, basically how we are all taught to operate from childhood.
Yeah, it really is.
Because the source material we are working with today, it takes everything we assume about how we process the world, how we make choices, and it strips it down to the bare mechanical studs.
It's like taking the engine completely apart.
Right. It essentially posits that our conscious interference in our own lives is it's a systemic bug. It's not a feature at all.
Which is wild. And if you are listening to this right now, you are likely navigating just an overwhelming amount of daily input.
Oh, everyone is.
Yeah, like professional demands, really complex social dynamics, the constant barrage of digital information on your phone.
The notifications literally never stop.
Never. And the default assumption for all of us is that to manage all of this, you need to be like a better mental engineer.
Right, you need a new productivity system.
Exactly. You think you need to think harder or categorize things better and apply, more rigorous logic to your schedule.
But these notes, they introduce this wild counter-narrative. Like, what if your biological system already knows exactly how to handle a situation literally a millisecond before you actually even think about it?
Like before the thought even forms in your head.
Yeah. And to really grasp the architecture of this hidden system, we first have to, systematically unlearn the conventional definition of that word, discernment.
Right, because in common parlance, like how we normally use it, discernment carries this really heavy moral and intellectual weight.
Absolutely. We think of a discerning person as someone who exercises careful judgment.
Like a judge in a courtroom or something.
Right, someone who applies a strict set of rules to evaluate whether something is good or bad or right or wrong.
But the sources are incredibly explicit right out of the gate here about what discernment is not.
Yeah, they don't pull any punches.
No, they don't. They say it is not judgment, it is not analysis, it is not the application of some learned heuristic.
And it is absolutely not a moral evaluation.
Right, because all of those processes, like judging a scenario or analyzing your colleagues' motives in a meeting or deciding if a new project aligns with your 5-year plan.
All of that requires conscious thought.
Exactly. They require intense conscious thought. And the notes argue that those are secondary. They come after the fact.
And that chronological distinction right there, that is the anchor for this entire framework.
Yeah, the timeline is everything.
Because the traditional model of human experience, the one that we are all completely conditioned into, it goes exactly like this.
Yeah.
An event occurs,
Right.
Input is received. Then we consciously think about that input.
We mull it over.
Right. And then finally, we decide upon a reaction. So it's input, cognition, decision.
The classic 1, 2, 3 step.
Exactly. But the notes completely dismantle that sequence. The reality they describe is that input happens, then there is an immediate pre-verbal system response.
Like a biological reaction.
Yes. And then, and only then, thought jumps in to interpret or honestly often misinterpret what just happened.
Wow.
So discernment is defined here strictly as, and I'm quoting the notes here, precognitive differentiation in how the system receives input.
Okay, let's pull that apart. Precognitive differentiation. Because I kept coming back to a technological analog to kind of make sense of this for myself.
Oh, I love a good tech analogy. Let's hear it.
Well, if we look at how a high-level spam filter operates in an email server, I feel like it provides a perfect mechanical blueprint for this.
Okay, yeah, tracking with you.
Because a spam filter does not, open the email, read the narrative text, and then ponder the moral character of the sender.
Right. Oh, of course not. It doesn't care.
Right. It doesn't make a philosophical judgment about whether a pharmaceutical advertisement is inherently evil. It doesn't perform any intellectual labor at all.
It operates purely on structural recognition.
Exactly. It instantly registers the weight of the data, maybe the specific sequence of the code, or the metadata of the routing path.
It's just scanning the architecture of the incoming signal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it differentiates the input purely mechanically. It instantly sorts the raw code before your phone ever even buzzes with a notification.
So the filter isn't analyzing anything. It's literally just routing.
It's just routing. And according to these notes, the human biological system has an identical built-in mechanism.
Which makes perfect biological sense.
We are constantly sorting environmental signals, right? Like a shift in a room's atmosphere or the cadence of an incoming request from your boss.
Even the structural demand of a conversation.
Right. All of this happens before the narrator in our head even wakes up to start talking about it.
And if we look at the underlying physiology of how humans process information, this maps perfectly onto concepts like neuroception.
Oh, right. Polyvagal theory stuff.
Exactly. The human nervous system takes in millions of bits of sensory data per second. Millions.
Staggering when you think about it.
But conscious awareness, the part we think of as us, can process only a tiny fractional percentage of that. Maybe like 40 bits per second.
So the spam filter is handling the millions of bits.
Exactly. The precognitive differentiation the text refers to is happening in that massive subconscious data stream. The system is literally reading the metadata of the environment.
Before we even have words for it.
Right. And the notes describe this early registration as a subtle tone or a movement. It is a physical shift in the organism before cognition ever attaches a noun or a verb to the experience.
But this introduces a massive philosophical problem, at least for me.
Oh, where did you get stuck?
Well, if this precognitive sorting is happening totally automatically like a biological spam filter, then who or what is actually making the decision?
Ah, the agency question.
Yes, because when I read this section of the notes, I felt an immediate pushback. Like, I am deeply attached to my agency.
We all are. It's the core of the human ego.
Exactly. If there is no who analyzing the data and making a choice, we just sound like passive meat robots reacting to stimuli. It really strips away the concept of the self as the captain of the ship.
I get that. And the sources actually boldly state that there is no who doing the discerning.
Which is terrifying.
It sounds scary, yeah. There's no entity, no central manager sitting in a control room pulling levers inside your head.
So we are just meat robots.
No, the leap to passive meat robot is a misunderstanding of system dynamics. It is not about passivity at all. It is about the inherent intelligence of natural structures.
Okay, explain that.
The text states that this differentiation is based entirely on, quote, the configuration of the system itself under current conditions.
Meaning the physical, biological, and energetic state we are in at that exact microsecond is what dictates the routing.
Precisely.
But I still struggle with the lack of an active doer. I mean, if I have to navigate a highly complex corporate merger or mediate a brutal family conflict, I can't just be an inert object waiting for my configuration to handle it, right?
Let's upgrade the metaphor then, because
Okay.
thinking of the system as inert is exactly where the friction lies.
Okay, I'm open. Upgrade me.
Look at the fly-by-wire system in a modern fighter jet.
Okay.
When that jet is moving at Mach 2, the aerodynamic environment is incredibly hostile. It's chaotic.
Right, tons of turbulence.
The pilot, which represents our conscious intellect, the who in this scenario, cannot possibly make the thousands of micro-adjustments to the wing flaps per second required to keep the plane from literally tearing itself apart.
Because the human brain is too slow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the fly-by-wire system takes in raw atmospheric data, wind speed, pressure, temperature, and instantly differentiates that input. It adjusts the control surfaces autonomously.
Oh, wow. So the pilot just sets the destination, but the system handles the actual physics of the turbulence.
Yes.
Yeah.
The system's configuration under current conditions handles it. There is no who deciding to adjust the left aileron by 2 millimeters.
It just happens based on the structure.
It is an organic responsiveness of the structural programming. When a biological system is not heavily disturbed, it categorizes inputs automatically. There is no exertion of effort. It is natural differentiation.
Okay, that actually helps a lot. So if we have this incredibly sophisticated precognitive fly-by-wire system making these constant micro-adjustments to our environment, how does that actually manifest in our physical experience? Because humans aren't just software, we feel things.
And that's exactly where the notes get really granular. They are rigorous about keeping this grounded in physical sensation rather than emotion.
Sensation, not emotion, that's a huge distinction.
Massive. Because when this natural discernment is active in a clean system, it registers purely as systemic sensations regarding structural integrity.
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
Like, what does it feel like?
The notes use distinct contrasting pairs to describe it. They say an incoming signal feels heavy versus clean.
Heavy versus clean.
Yeah, it invites continuation or it collapses. It opens the system or it contracts it.
See, this is where people usually start using really mystical language, right? They walk into a room and say, oh, the vibe is heavy or the energy is contracted.
Exactly, and the notes are trying to demystify that entirely.
Which I appreciate, because if we strip away the mysticism, what we are actually talking about is a structural stress test.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Think about civil engineering. Before you open a new bridge to traffic, you run simulations.
You have to.
Right. You apply a simulated load to see if the materials will hold their integrity or if they will buckle under the pressure.
The human system is running that exact simulation in real time with every single incoming signal.
Yes. Okay, so imagine you receive an email from a client demanding a sudden pivot in a project.
A classic stressor.
Right. In the millisecond, before you consciously read the words and get angry about the extra work, your system receives the raw signal of that demand.
The metadata.
Exactly. And it instantly stress tests it. It calculates, if I engage with this specific signal trajectory, will my internal structure buckle?
Will I lose stability?
Right. And if the answer is yes, you feel a physical sensation of heaviness or contraction. If engaging will maintain your structural integrity, it feels clean.
The text utilizes a brilliant, highly technical phrase for this precise mechanism. They call it a stability response preview.
Stability response preview. We have to unpack that.
We do, because it fundamentally reorients how we view all of our reactions. Usually, if we feel a heavy negative sensation when we read that client email, we attribute the heaviness to the email itself.
Right. We say that email is bad or that client is toxic.
Exactly. We project it outward. But the notes suggest we are completely mislabeling the phenomenon. The heaviness is not a property of the signal at all.
It's not.
No. It is the system sensing its own future response to the signal.
Oh, wow. So it is previewing how the engagement will propagate through the organism before the engagement actually happens.
Yes. It is literally a glimpse into the immediate future of your own nervous system.
That is wild. It is projecting the trajectory.
Going back to the plane, the fly-by-wire system detects a pocket of violent turbulence ahead and instantly registers the systemic strain that will occur if that specific path is maintained.
So the heavy feeling is literally just the system flagging a trajectory that leads to instability.
It's an internal warning light.
But this brings us to a massive, glaring contradiction.
I know where you're going with this.
If we possess this flawless, built-in stability response preview, like this immaculate early warning system that knows exactly what will destabilize us before we even process the thought.
Why is everyone so exhausted?
Yes.
Wow.
Why do we constantly find ourselves drowning in toxic dynamics or committing to projects we hate and just feeling completely structurally unstable all the time? I mean, the math isn't mathing.
It really isn't.
If the system is so smart, why are our lives so messy?
And this is where the notes pivot from the mechanics of the system to the core dysfunction of the human condition.
Okay, the dark side.
They call it the routing problem.
Yeah.
And the primary villain in this failure is the very thing we worship most in modern society.
The intellect.
The intellect. The intellect jumping in too early. The notes explicitly call it premature interpretation.
I'm going to defend the intellect here for a second.
I figured you might. Go ahead.
Because from an evolutionary standpoint, our ability to think and reason and analyze complex data is what allowed us to survive. It is our greatest tool.
It built civilization, absolutely.
Right. So if a signal comes in, say, a really strange request from a family member that feels heavy, aren't I supposed to analyze that?
That's the assumption.
If I just drop every uncomfortable signal, how do I ever resolve complex interpersonal problems? Isn't thinking about it the responsible thing to do?
Your defense of the intellect is exactly the trap the sources describe in detail.
Ouch. Okay, explain.
The intellect is an unmatched tool for manipulating external environments, right? For building the bridge, for designing the software, for balancing the spreadsheet.
Sure.
But it is a catastrophic tool for primary internal signal routing. When you forcefully apply the intellect to a precognitive routing decision, you completely override the natural differentiation.
You jam the gears.
You do. The notes are explicit about the consequence here. They say, and I quote, everything gets interpreted, everything gets engaged, and everything becomes something to deal with.
Everything becomes something to do. Wow, that is the exact definition of modern burnout.
It really is.
We take signals that the system naturally flagged to just ignore or drop, and we drag them onto the cognitive workbench.
We force a manual override. Think back to the fighter jet. If your fly-by-wire system automatically adjusts the flaps to handle the turbulence, but you as the pilot suddenly panic, override the system, grab the stick, and try to manually calculate the wind shear.
And then try to manually adjust the flaps.
Yeah, what happened?
The plane crashes. The pilot simply cannot process the data fast enough.
Exactly. You introduce massive instability by forcing a manual cognitive process onto an automatic systemic function.
The brain is too slow for the data stream.
The text points out that when discernment is left alone, no forcing occurs. Some signals naturally pass, some engage, some drop.
They just flow.
Discernment is not the act of choosing correctly through intense logical rigor. It is the discipline of not interfering with the system's innate ability to differentiate.
So by insisting on intellectualizing every heavy signal, you literally force your system to digest a meal it already identified as toxic.
That's a great way to phrase it. And when you do that, the routing fails, the disturbance localizes in your mind as anxiety or endless rumination, and your systemic instability just spikes.
We force the system to digest a meal it already knew was toxic just because we want to analyze the recipe. That is incredibly damning.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
But part of the confusion lies in how we talk about these early warnings. The sources actually spend a significant amount of time deconstructing the metaphors we use to describe these pre-verbal sensations.
Yeah, because we don't really have the right vocabulary for it.
Right. People often reach for these pseudo-mystical or vague acoustic terms. They'll say, oh, I didn't like the tone of that proposal.
Or we just weren't on the same frequency.
Exactly. Or the angle of their approach was off.
The notes clarify that words like tone, frequency, and angle are just the intellect trying to slap a Post-it note on a purely mechanical shift.
It's just a label.
Right. They're intuitive labels for the recognition of a signal's trajectory. But the deeper implication here is how this framework completely redefined the concept of intelligence itself.
This part blew my mind, because we operate under the paradigm that intelligence is basically just cognitive processing power, right?
IQ tests, SAT scores.
Exactly. The ability to hold complex data, manipulate abstract concepts, and articulate really clever arguments.
But the sources ask a really piercing question here. Is there intelligence in all systems?
Right. And the answer provided is that intelligence is not synonymous with intellect at all.
Not even close.
Intelligence is the capacity of any system to differentiate incoming signals without destabilizing itself.
A tree possesses intelligence.
Yes, in how its root system differentiates soil gradients and moisture levels without a single conscious thought.
Exactly. Therefore, human intelligence at its absolute base level is not about passing a test or sounding smart. It is the sheer capacity to maintain your structural stability in the face of continuous environmental input.
That is so profound. To achieve that true systemic intelligence, the notes introduce a critical prerequisite. They call it dynamic alignment.
Dynamic alignment.
Yeah. They state that a fully functioning system is not pre-aligned. Because it holds no pre-alignment, a clean reception of the signal can occur, allowing alignment or non-alignment to just emerge naturally as a response to the current conditions.
Unpacking that idea of pre-alignment is so vital because we live in a culture that demands constant pre-alignment.
Oh, totally. We are encouraged to constantly harden our identities.
Pick a team.
Yes, walk into every room with a rigid political stance or a defensive posture, or just a predetermined set of expectations about how things should go.
And cognitive bias is basically just a form of pre-alignment.
Ideology is pre-alignment.
Trauma responses are pre-alignment. If you enter a high-stakes negotiation already pre-aligned to the absolute belief that the other party is trying to scam you,
your system cannot perform a clean stability response preview.
it's impossible. You have effectively blindfolded your fly-by-wire sensors. You aren't reading the actual trajectory of the incoming signal anymore.
You are simply bouncing the incoming signal off the armor of your own pre-existing assumptions.
Exactly. You introduce a massive localized disturbance before the interaction even begins.
Which perfectly sets up the most practical, actionable constraint in these nodes.
The environment.
Yes. For any of this precognitive telemetry to work, the system requires a very specific environmental baseline. The text emphasizes the absolute necessity of low disturbance.
Low disturbance. Because discernment is described as a global system shift that occurs before thought localizes it into a specific problem.
It's subtle.
Incredibly subtle. Because it is a global pre-verbal shift, it's remarkably quiet. If your biological and energetic system is noisy, you are effectively deaf to the telemetry.
Let's ground noisy and low disturbance, because we weren't just talking about sitting in a quiet room, right?
No, it's about internal architecture.
Right. So if we go back to the idea of a physical vibration, imagine sitting alone in an utterly silent, completely empty library.
Okay, very peaceful.
You have your phone in your pocket and it's set to silent. If it vibrates, even just a microbuzz lasting half a second, you feel it instantly.
Oh, yeah. The signal is unmistakable.
Your resolution of detection is incredibly high because the surrounding environment has extremely low disturbance.
The signal-to-noise ratio heavily favors the signal.
Exactly. Now, take that exact same phone with the exact same vibration motor and put it in your pocket while you are standing in the front row of a heavy metal rock concert.
Okay, totally different scenario.
The bass is shaking the floorboards, the crowd is screaming, the subwoofers are literally vibrating your ribcage. Your phone could ring continuously for an hour and you would never feel it.
Not a chance.
But the incoming signal hasn't changed. The phone is outputting the exact same amount of energy, but your resolution of detection has plummeted to zero because the system is just completely overloaded with competing physical shifts.
That analogy scales perfectly to human biology. What constitutes the rock concert inside a human system?
Chronic sleep deprivation, for one.
Yes. It is the constant drip of cortisol from doom scrolling on social media. It is having back-to-back Zoom meetings with absolutely no refractory period in between.
It is unresolved emotional tension you carry around all day.
Exactly. When your nervous system is vibrating at that level of high disturbance, there are just way too many competing systemic shifts occurring simultaneously.
So when your natural discernment mechanism performs a stability preview on a new opportunity, say a new job offer, and flags it as heavy,
when it tries to send that tiny microbuzz to warn you that this path leads to collapse,
you completely miss it. You just can't feel the vibration over the base of your own chronic stress.
And this is why so many people feel fundamentally disconnected from their own decision-making process.
They think they're broken.
They assume they lack discernment or that their gut is just broken. But the mechanism is not broken. It is simply operating in an environment of such high disturbance that the telemetry cannot be registered.
So lowering the internal disturbance is not like a wellness luxury. It's not just about taking bubble baths.
No, it is a mechanical necessity for accurate routing.
Now, I know anyone who has spent time in self-development spaces is listening to this right now and screaming, you guys are just talking about intuition. Just call it intuition.
I know, it sounds identical at first glance.
But the sources actually spend a significant amount of time addressing this directly. They reveal why intuition is actually a highly dangerous and inaccurate label for this process.
The distinction here is critical because it highlights exactly where human processing goes terribly wrong.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The text acknowledges the overlap. Both true discernment and what we colloquially call intuition rely on fast, pre-verbal, non-analytic sensing.
So they are cousins.
Yes. In a hypothetical state of perfect zero disturbance clarity, early-stage discernment looks very much like intuition. But in standard human usage, the concept of intuition is deeply compromised.
The notes actually provide a kind of mathematical formula for this compromise, which I found fascinating.
Let's hear the formula.
They state that what most people call intuition is actually the true signal, the precognitive differentiation, PLUS conditioning, and memory overlays.
True signal plus overlay. And the overlay is the contaminant.
Exactly.
When your system is noisy, what you label as intuition becomes dangerously unreliable because it's heavily diluted with bias, emotional patterning, learned heuristics, and most destructively, fear projection.
Fear projection. That is the trap we all fall into. Let's really pull this apart because we are constantly told by society to just trust our gut.
It's the ultimate cliche.
We venerate intuition. Someone will say, oh, my intuition is telling me not to trust this new hire. I just have a bad feeling about them.
And they treat that feeling as an infallible oracle.
Right. But if we run that scenario through the mechanics of these notes, the reality is far more complex, isn't it?
Completely. Let's trace the mechanics of that specific example. You are interviewing the new hire.
Okay.
They utilize a specific phrase or maybe display a micro-expression or just carry a certain cadence in their voice. Your pure precognitive discernment mechanism receives that signal and runs the stability preview.
The structural stress test.
Right. Now, the pure structural read might actually be completely neutral. Engaging with this person will not destabilize the system.
But the intellect and the memory banks intercept the signal.
Exactly. The amygdala, which acts as the brain's threat detection center, scans the metadata of that person's cadence and recognizes a pattern.
Oh, no.
It matches that specific cadence to a deeply toxic former business partner who nearly ruined your career 5 years ago.
Ah. So instantly, before you are consciously aware of the memory at all, your nervous system throws a massive fear overlay onto the neutral signal.
Your biology basically screams danger based on historical data, not present reality.
And so you feel a sudden, violent contraction in your gut.
Right. And because you don't understand the mechanics of the overlay, you conflate the trauma response with the true signal.
You label the localized panic as intuition.
And you reject a perfectly good candidate. You have completely mistaken past pattern imprinting for present moment discernment.
That is genuinely terrifying. I mean, if our gut is just a highlight reel of unhealed trauma and historical bias masquerading as present moment insight, then blindly trusting it is a catastrophic strategy.
It absolutely is. And this reinforces the absolute necessity of maintaining a low disturbance state.
You have to quiet the system.
You have to. The only way to delineate between a true precognitive stability preview and a fear-based memory overlay is to quiet the internal environment enough that you can sense the pure initial trajectory of the signal before the historical conditioning has time to corrupt it.
It's about catching it in that microsecond gap.
Exactly.
Okay, let's assume someone manages to do that. They cultivate a really nice low disturbance baseline.
They've done the work.
Right. They sense the pure signal. They feel the clear mechanical heaviness of a toxic situation before the intellect jumps in, and they successfully avoid the fear overlay. They have achieved perfect discernment. The system works.
It sounds like a success story.
But the sources reveal a final, brutal hurdle. It turns out receiving the signal perfectly is only half the battle.
The notes shift focus in this final section from the mechanics of receiving to the mechanics of trusting.
We're not trusting.
Right. Or, more precisely, how the human system routinely chooses to interfere with what it has already flawlessly registered.
The override. This is the tragic flaw in the whole architecture.
It's so painfully human.
It is. The system works perfectly. It registers the incoming signal. It runs the stability preview. It clearly identifies that engaging with this particular relationship or this particular project will cause structural collapse. It literally hands you the exact right answer.
And then
We override it. We march right into the fire anyway.
We execute the override constantly. I mean, think about it. You sense with absolute crystalline clarity that a situation is structurally off. You feel the heavy, contracting, collapsing sensation in your core.
You know it's wrong.
And yet, you sign the contract anyway. You go on the second date. You take the job.
Why? I mean, I read this section and just mentally cataloged a dozen times in my own life where every fiber of my biological fly-by-wire system was screaming to pull up, and I manually drove the plane right into the mountain.
We've all been there.
Why do we feel the inevitable structural collapse of a choice and still choose to engage?
We override the system because we are culturally conditioned to deeply distrust the pre-verbal.
We idolize the intellect.
We demand receipts.
Yeah.
We live in a society that requires logical justification for absolutely every action.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Like if you tell a colleague, hey, I am going to decline this highly lucrative partnership because my precognitive system ran a stability response preview and registered a structural heaviness.
They will look at you like you need psychiatric help.
They would literally laugh me out of the room. You need a spreadsheet. You need a list of pros and cons. You need a highly articulate argument to justify dropping the signal.
The intellect demands that every signal becomes something to deal with. The pure discernment system says, drop this. It leads to instability.
But the intellect intercepts that command and says, wait a minute, I need a verifiable reason to drop it.
I need to investigate the structural flaw. I need to analyze the other person's motives. I need to be absolutely sure.
And in demanding certainty, you force the system to engage with the very destabilizing element it was trying to protect you from in the first place.
You take a perfectly solved equation and force it to become a problem again.
Wow. The sources distill this down to an ultimate formula for maintaining systemic equilibrium, and it is remarkably stark. They say discernment is available, interference is optional.
That is the crux of the entire framework right there. Stability does not depend solely on your ability to sense the signal.
It depends on not messing with it.
Exactly. It depends entirely on your willingness to not override the sensing. The highest form of systemic intelligence is allowing the differentiation to happen without intellectual interference.
Which requires profound trust. To let a heavy signal drop without needing to intellectually dissect why it needed to drop.
The system already ran the Monte Carlo simulation. You do not need to pull out a calculator and double-check the math.
Discernment is available. Interference is optional. That represents a massive paradigm shift. It completely removes the exhausting burden of having to logically figure your entire life out.
It essentially relieves the intellect of a job it was never biologically designed to do.
Let's synthesize the ground we've covered today, because these notes really dismantle a lot of deeply held beliefs.
They tear down the whole house.
We started by completely stripping discernment of all its moral and intellectual baggage. We redefined it not as, a spreadsheet of pros and cons, but as a purely mechanical, precognitive differentiation of incoming signals.
Then we explored how the system runs that rapid stability response preview, constantly checking its own future structural integrity in response to a signal.
Which manifests physically as that sensation of being heavy or clean.
We also recognize that there is no who managing this process. It operates automatically based on the current configuration of the system, very much like an aircraft's fly-by-wire system.
But we routinely sabotage this flawless routing by letting our intellect jump in prematurely, demanding to analyze and process signals that were already flagged for the trash bin.
We differentiated true systemic intelligence from cognitive power, noting that true intelligence is simply the capacity to maintain stability.
And we highlighted the absolute necessity of maintaining a low-disturbance environment.
Quieting the rock concert.
Right, so we can actually feel the subtle signals while avoiding the trap of intuition, which is so often just historical fear masking itself as insight.
And finally, we confronted the ultimate human habit of overriding our own telemetry because we demand logical receipts for pre-verbal truths.
Discernment is available, interference is optional.
The final line of the source material compresses this entire philosophy so perfectly. It states, and I'll quote it exactly, "The system usually knows before it thinks. It becomes unstable when it does not trust what it already registered."
The system knows before it thinks. If you are listening to this right now, I want to leave you with a highly specific and probably highly uncomfortable challenge based on that exact line.
This should be good.
What would happen if, for just 1 hour tomorrow, maybe during your morning commute or during your first deep work block of the day, you consciously decided not to trust a single logical thought you had?
Wow. That is a radical suspension of the intellect.
It is.
Yeah.
What if for 60 minutes you flat out refused to analyze, refused to weigh pros and cons, and instead only trusted the pure, physical, clean, or heavy sensation that arose in the millisecond before the words formed in your head?
It would be terrifying at first.
Totally. But if a task feels heavy, drop it immediately without thinking about why. If an email feels contracted, close it without justifying it. Could you let a signal pass straight through your biological spam filter into the trash without pulling it out to inspect the code?
Could you let a moment simply pass without forcing it to become something to deal with?
The resistance from your intellect will be immense, I promise you. But the systemic stability waiting on the other side of that practice might just be profound.
I think it would change everything.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden precognitive architecture of your own awareness. We hope this framework provides you with a radically different way to navigate the noise of modern life. Keep questioning the defaults, keep your configuration clean, and above all,
See if you can keep your system quiet.